Okay, welcome back. Good to see people chatting. I hope you've been sharing your stories of faith with each other, as Matthew encouraged us to do. Okay, we're going to get straight into it, really. So, in the first session, we kind of set the scene a little bit. How do we get traction with people around us? How do we stay tethered to God's word? And we did that. We looked at Romans 1 and we looked at Acts 17. And remember the big things that I want to be kind of you to be thinking about as we go through the day. All human beings are already in a relationship with God. They're in this divine dance of suppressing the truth, and God reveals himself. And when we enter into a conversation with someone, there's already a relationship that's going on. And we're not to look in or lash out, we're to look out for the sake of God's glory and for the sake of the lost. But that's all great, but it sounds very abstract, and so we need to put some flesh on the bones, which is what we're going to do now. And there's a particular framework that I want to work with, and this is where I'm going to get you involved a little bit, and you're going to start thinking about this for yourself and what it means for you in your context, in Bradford or in your church and your local community. And this is work that's been inspired by a missionary, by a guy, he was a guy called J.H. Bavinck, and he lived from 1895 to 1964, and he was a missionary, a Dutch Reformed missionary in Indonesia, in Jakarta. And he ended up teaching back in Amsterdam at the university there. And I've been very influenced by his teaching. I think he's quite prophetic in the way that he thinks about these things. And J.H. Bavinck is operating in a very multicultural context in Indonesia. Lots of people, Hindus, some a particular form of Islam, all kinds of different beliefs. And Bavinck says, look, all these other religions are saying very different things, but there seem to be some kind of similarities in the kind of questions that all people ask. And here's what he says. There seems to be a kind of framework within which human religions need to operate. There appear to be definite points of contact around which all kinds of ideas crystallize. There seem to be quite vague feelings, one might better call them direction signals, that have been actively brooding everywhere. Perhaps this can be expressed thus. There seem to be definite magnetic points that time and again irresistibly compel human religious thought. Human beings cannot escape their power, but must provide an answer to those basic questions posed to them. So what my work is about is saying this was J.H. Bavinck's thinking in the 1930s and 40s, but I think it's very relevant to our situation today. And Bavinck says all human beings have a religious consciousness. They're always doing this thing that we talked about in the first session. They know God, they don't know him, they're running to him, they're running away from him. And if you can unpack that, if you can kind of lift up the bonnet and see what's underneath, lift up the hood, what do we see? And Bavinck says, look, all human beings have these particular itches that they have to scratch. So what we're doing now is we're going to look at these itches and how people scratch them. That's what we're looking at. You know when you have an itch and you really want to kind of give it a good scratch? Well, Bavinck's saying that God has made us, and the way that we suppress the truth, and there's this divine human dance that's going on, these are the scratches. Now, some important things to say before we get into the analysis. People aren't consciously thinking about these magnetic points. Again, people just want the car to go. They don't look under the bonnet, but that's what we're doing this morning. So people aren't thinking about these things, but their lives are answers to these particular points and questions that people ask. Yeah? The decisions they make, the relationships they have, their views on all kinds of things. But of course, no one stops to think because people are just living their lives. But people are always living out these magnetic points. And secondly, we will go through them sequentially, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But they're all related, they all impact on the others. These are kind of just ways in, I suppose. They're all ways into looking at one particular person and their relationship with God, or their relationship in their kind of community. So this is what we're going to do. I want you to be thinking of particular people that you know, particular in your particular context. You don't have to name them, they can be anonymous, but it helps if you just think of someone. Maybe it's someone who you've been trying to witness to and talk about Jesus to for a long time. And I want you to try and get into their kind of mindset if you can. And that's quite hard sometimes. That's why we need to know people well. But as we're going through these points, I want you to think, how would that person answer that question? Or how would our community answer that question? And think very, very local. Yeah? That's really important. So what we're going to do is I'm going to describe this point. I'll give a few examples of my own, and then I want you to work out in small groups, little groups, just how you'd start thinking about these things as well. And at the moment, and this is where we're going to find it very hard, I don't want you at the moment to think about the answer's Jesus. I know the answer's Jesus. We're going to get to Jesus in about 40 minutes. At the moment, I just want you us to describe the kind of answers that people give to these questions. Does that make sense? Okay. Bavinck says, these are my words, not his. The first magnetic point is this. Totality. Is there a way to connect? Human beings have a sense of totality, that we're just small cogs in a much bigger machine, and that somehow we're kind of interconnected. And when we're by ourselves or alone, we feel insignificant. But when we connect with something or someone that's bigger than us, we feel a sense of belonging. We get our sense of identity. We suddenly feel significant. We're part of something that's bigger in the universe. And we crave for it again and again after we're disconnected, but then we want to be connected to it again and again. Let me give you some examples. Now, I'm going to use the example of Facebook. Now, I know if you're kind of an older generation, you might not use Facebook. If you're a younger generation, you don't use Facebook because it's out of date. So I'm going for a middle example. So Facebook is a social media site, yeah? Even if you don't use it. Are people vaguely aware of what Facebook is? Yes. Thank you. I'm liking the definite yeses and no's. Very good. Right. In 2011, Facebook had its 1 billionth user. In 2011. Here's the advert celebrating Facebook. We're thinking of connection. Chairs. Chairs are made so that people can sit down and take a break. Anyone can sit on a chair, and if the chair is large enough, they can sit down and tell jokes or make up stories or just listen. Chairs are for people, and that's why chairs are like Facebook. Doorbells, airplanes, bridges, these are things people use to get together so they can open up and connect about ideas and music and other things that people share. Dance floors, basketball, we could say cricket, we could say Leeds United, there could be all kinds of things that we could say. A great nation. A great nation is something people build so they can have a place where they belong. The universe, it is vast and dark, and it makes us wonder if we are alone. So maybe the reason we make all of these things is to remind us that we're not. Now that is a great example of saying to people that connecting with something else is important. We need to connect with each other. What about people who are really fascinated by genealogies and family trees? Why is there a real rise in that in our culture? Because people want to know that they're connected, they're rooted to something that's bigger than them. They come from somewhere, they've got some significance. When I was down in London yesterday on the tube, invariably all of the kind of the advertising, it's all for dating apps. Match.com, silver singles. Some people are going, oh, I might try that one out. Here's the idea. I need to find someone who's going to complete me. Until there is someone out there who will give me my identity so that there will be a completeness in my life. This is how I want to belong. I'd love you just in groups of, and if you just turn around into groups of 4 or 5, the people who you know, where are they looking for that sense of connection and identity? Who or what do they kind of belong to or join or part of that gives them that sense of being part of something bigger, that gives them a sense of identity and significance? What would you say? Just in groups of, just turn around and then we'll have some feedback on this in a minute. Let's come back together. My beautiful assistant's going to help me, Matthew, with the mic, the roving mic. So yeah, we'll have a little bit of feedback. Where are the inhabitants of this great place called Bradford? Where are people looking for connection and significance in terms of identity? What are the things that they go to? Who wants to give? Yes, WhatsApp, social media.
Facebook, no more phone calls, messages.
Very good.
Or being around people.
Thank you, very good. So social media and communication, that's very good. That's where people have a lot of community. Thank you very much. Yes, good. What football team? Yeah, we'll get to football in a minute, yes.
Yeah. Working men's clubs, where there's plenty of people gather.
Working men's clubs?
Working men's clubs, yeah.
Yeah, and just, sorry, can I ask you a bit more on that? So is that, I mean, you hear that all of those things have died out, but obviously not. They're still
not at all, no.
No.
In our town, Ilkley, there's a really busy. It's now a snooker club as well. And
if you were to kind of just unpack that a bit more, why do you think they remain popular?
Well, they've got a common lifestyle.
Yep.
And there's good beer.
Good, yeah, okay.
And music.
Get away from the wife and kids. Here we go. This is what we. Good, thank you. Good. So yeah, community kind of groups. Good. We've heard football as well, of course. The things that connect us. Yeah, lady over here. Oh, there's a mic coming.
Certainly gyms now, like the village and things like that, it creates a bit of a culture, doesn't it, where people would go to exercise, but then there's a coffee shop and, you know, it's all about well-being, and so you get a lot of kind of community within that.
Yeah, I know it doesn't look it, but I do parkrun quite regularly, and parkrun is really interesting because you might just say, well, it's just a 5k round the park, but actually if you look at the philosophy behind it, it's all about community and stay on afterwards, you can talk to people. Obviously, it's now prescribed on the NHS as kind of, you know, go and do parkrun. But that, again, that sense of community. Even just when you are part of stuff and you don't realise, there was last year, I don't know whether it was a pro-Palestinian or pro-Israel, I think it was a pro-Palestinian march. And they were interviewing some people who were involved, these two kind of young girls. And they were asking them about, you know, why they were there. They had no idea. They had no idea about the politics. They just wanted to be part of something that's bigger than them. They just wanted to feel connected, yeah? And you can say that about that. You can say that about any kind of concert or music experience, you know, being part of something bigger. There's something that's going on that's just different than if I'm in my bedroom with my hairbrush just singing to myself. So it's that, that was an example that I don't actually, well, look at that. I mean, what kind of a hairbrush am I going to use? Exactly. So this idea of connection, anything else that hasn't mentioned? Yeah. Railway enthusiast. Yes. Very good. So hobbies, yeah. It's interesting, there's a big, when I do this material, in rural contexts as opposed to city contexts, what connects people still in rural contexts is the land. The land is still very important. I remember doing this in the Republic of Ireland, and still the farming community, the idea of being connected to the land in some way is really important. In the city, well, you can't connect to the land because there isn't any of it. So again, and still family would still be a big kind of connection point, wouldn't it? Yeah, some other thing. The lady there and then gentleman in front.
Yeah, food banks and cafes run by churches or community centres.
Yes, very good, thank you. Gentleman here.
So you have UK Men's Shed and Andy's Man Club and the WI.
Yes, very good. Excellent. Yeah, a few more. Wow. The occult, yes, again. There's lady over there. This lady here and then lady at the back.
We speak about, in our work, what we connect with each other. So we realize that is our morals, values, morals, integrity. That's for us is more important.
Yeah,
Morals.
very good.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. And the lady here. Knit and natter. There you go. No mic needed for that. I just said it. There you go. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, and the lady here.
Dog walking.
Dog walking. Yeah. Great. This is great. Okay. These are all ways that we find connection. What's interesting, of course, is that sometimes we hear that loneliness is a massive epidemic and the rates of suicide and people. So there's a slight tension here because I think there is a lot of loneliness in our community at the same time as people doing lots of community things as well. So there's a bit of a tension there. But yeah, these are great ways in which people try to look for or find connection. Okay, shelve that. Second magnetic point. Norm. Is there a way to live? There's a vague expectation that there are rules to be obeyed. People know that there are moral standards and codes. And by that, I don't mean people know the Ten Commandments. It's every culture, every society, every community has its own rules for what's acceptable and what's not, what's in and what makes you in and what makes you out. And this brings a sense of responsibility to live up to those norms. So, a friend of mine was in a coffee shop. A lady came into the coffee shop and said to the person who was serving, "Are your straws paper or plastic?" And the man said, "They're paper." And the lady said, "Thank goodness, I'm glad that I can drink here." If the straw had been plastic, she would not have been there. That was the norm. That was the rule. And we all have rules as to what's in and what's out. Is there a way to live? Certain ways we have to conduct ourselves. Even groups that are against the norm have their own rules. A friend of mine, who was a student of mine, she was a goth in her youth, and part of the appeal was being different to the norm, but the other side of it was that she and her friends were all different together in the same way. The goth rules were very different to the rules of the wider culture, but they were there. Apparently, if you're in the goth community, you can wear baby pink if you're an older goth, because it's ironic, but if you don't have the right credentials, you'd show yourself as not fitting in. So even people who go against the rules still conform to their own communities. Now, we don't have time now, but again, just think about what would be the kinds of the rules that make people in and out. And what I'm trying to do here is just to show that these are all kind of almost like, these are kind of religious commitments. These are commitments to things, commitments to principles. The third one, deliverance. Is there a way out? Everyone knows that there's something not quite right with the world. That's a little and common disputed notion. There's finitude and brokenness and wrongdoing. The problem of suffering consistently confronts us. We mourn for paradise lost, long for deliverance. So here's the idea. Look, we all know that something's wrong. The question is, we can't agree on what the problem is, let alone on what the solution is. And we want to be delivered. Now, let me just give you some qualifications here so it's not so abstract. Deliverance is not simply, I'm going to die one day, what do I think about that? Because I think some people think about that, but often people are just living their lives. It's like mini deliverances. You know, people who think, how do I get through the day without another drink? How do I get through the night without the kid crying? How do I get to the weekend so I can just have a life because the week's been so hard? They're kind of mini deliverances. Also, deliverance is not simply about looking to the future, I wish life was better. Sometimes it's looking to the past to say, I wish it was like it used to be. Nostalgia. It's saying, if only Bradford was like it was in... There you go. Yeah, there you go, you see? It's that looking back. Now, we need to be... Now, I'm going to put in a little bit of Christian content here because Ecclesiastes 7:9, do not say, why were the old days better than these? It's not wise to ask such things. But we do. It's interesting. That's a very historic way of thinking. the Romantics, the philosophical movement called the Romantics. So you had the French Revolution in 1789. Lots of people died, very bloody. The Romantics come along and they say, this is terrible. So what the Romantics used to do is they used to build ruins. Why? Because it gave the kind of the sense of, there's a lost world that we need to recover. This is why they love the Arthurian legends and all of these other things in the past. And we have our own kind of sentimentality for a world that's been lost. And we want to be delivered back to that world. And finally, even we seek to look for deliverance in not thinking about deliverance. A friend of mine is a pastor. He's discipling 2 guys in his congregation who are addicted to a game on their phone called Clash of Clans. Just because they don't want to deal with life. They're just addicted to the game because they just want to zone out. That's a form of deliverance as well. Just in your groups, just think about that then. For the people that you know, what is the big problem that needs to be solved? Is it a looking forward and a looking back? What would make everything okay? How would people answer that with the people that you know and want to, that you live with? Just think about that in your groups for a minute. Have a chat. Let's come back together again. I know I'm not giving you much time, but time is marching on. Can we do the mic again? So what did we say about some deliverance examples for the people that in our community? What are people looking for to be delivered from or looking back to? Or yeah, lady at the back there.
To be delivered from the burdens of responsibility.
Yeah, any example? Any
At work, family.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good.
That fall on their shoulders.
So work is the kind of the oppressor, and to be kind of delivered from that. And yeah, great, thank you.
I think we need to be delivered from being the society that we're living in today, that we go and no looking back, we should look forward. But there are issues with the culture, the parenting, children in schools, the disobedience they are going through in life. There's no discipline with children because the parents can't even discipline them because they are taught, their children are telling their parents that if you hit me or if you chastise me, I can have you arrested. And the law has helped the children to behave in the sense that they are behaving.
Thank you.
Because there is no discipline.
Thank you. Great, thank you. Other people? Lady here? Oh, Matt. Go to you first.
I think deliverance in terms of if I reach a point of well-being, physical or mental, that will be me delivered if I can get there. Yeah. Yeah,
it's interesting on that one. In the book, I give this very famous sports psychiatrist, Steve Peters, who's done lots of work with Olympians, but he wrote this book called The Chimp Paradox, and he said the problem isn't outside of us, the problem's in you. We've got this kind of chimp who's kind of, we need to kind of tame the chimp, and the problem is you. If you can do that, you can be delivered from your kind of issues that you're dealing with. And there's lots of that thinking, that the problem isn't out there, the problem's in here. Yeah, great. A couple more?
People are really enslaved to their jobs because they've got such big houses, they have to work all the time to pay for them.
Yes, very good. Okay, we're going to move on. So, deliverance. The next magnetic point, this is my kind of, you shouldn't have favourite children, but this is my favourite magnetic point. Destiny, is there a way that we control? And it goes a bit like this. Bavinck has this great saying. He says, we both lead our lives and we undergo our lives. Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, I think that I'm in control of my life. I can do what I want to do. I've got agency. I can, you know, the world is a great adventure. I can go for it. Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, I'm just a pawn in someone else's chess game. I'm a puppet on a string. I've got no agency. There's no point in doing anything. Stuff's just going to happen anyway. And Bavinck says we kind of swing between these two things. I'm in control, I feel in control, but I'm not in control. I've done this work with students, really interesting. I did a group of Newcastle freshers, so first years at Newcastle Uni, and I was talking to the Christians and doing their mission week. And I said to them, what are some of the things that the students are kind of dealing with at the moment? And two really interesting things that illustrate what I've just said. The first was, a lot of young people are into this phenomenon called manifesting. Hands up if you heard about manifesting. Yeah. You're using crystals sometimes. If you get on it comes from Oprah. If you get on the cosmic wavelength of the universe, if you think something hard enough using crystals, that thing will come into being. Now you might think, that's craziness, but hundreds of thousands of people are into it. So a student at Newcastle University, a non-Christian there, had thought that they really wanted a boyfriend and they'd manifested their boyfriend that week. It's kind of radical, positive power thinking. But it's the same as the brother here, that those kinds of things, those kinds of more occultish things are very kind of popular at the moment. To say, I'm in control, I can literally bring reality to how I want it to be. The other thing that was going on in Newcastle Uni was that there'd been a boycott on nightclubs because 2 students had been ill, and I think one had even died through injection spiking in the neck, date rape drugs. So people weren't going out to nightclubs. So at that point, you've got, on the one hand, we can bring reality into a being, and the other, we're not going to go out because we're just going to be kind of oppressed. You see how there's both of those things are going on at the same time. And it's really interesting. I think when I do this material, not just in the UK, but in other countries as well, cultures have their own, or communities have their own, not without caricaturing, but they have their own sense of this. Are we in control or are we under control? So I've done this material in the Central European country of Slovakia. And the Slovakians, wonderful people, but I was speaking to a group of like 90 pastors, and I said, do Slovakians think that they're in control or under control? 100%, we're a nation we always think we're under someone else's control. First it was the Austro-Hungarians, then it was the Czechs. We're always the last to be thought of, we're the bottom of the shoe. There's no point in doing anything because stuff will just happen to us. That's the psyche of the people. I've done this material in the United States of America. Have you ever heard an American talk like that? No, we can do whatever we want to. We can make it happen. It's interesting, I do think Brits are kind of like, we're a bit in the middle, aren't we? We're the perfect middle, yeah? But it's interesting, I'd love to know in your, and we won't go into groups, but if Matthew's got the mic, we can, do Bradford people, do you think that we're in control or under control, or under someone else's control? What's the kind of the psyche around here? Yes, sorry brother, can you say that again? Yeah. Yes, okay, so maybe there's a feeling that maybe the government was kind of is in control of us. Good, other things, yeah?
Yeah, the Mayor of Bradford's controlling the whole area.
Okay, the Mayor of Bradford, okay, so that's, okay, good, others? Of course, we don't have to agree with everything that's being said here, but it's good to know what people are thinking, yes?
I think there's a Yorkshire mindset that says, no, I'm going to do it my way, thanks.
Okay, good. Of course, how do you answer that? Because you should say, no, I don't believe you, because it's my way, yeah. It's kind of, yeah, we're caught there. Yeah, okay. But this idea is really important about how we're engaging people. And it's saying, all people are wrestling with that all the time. Now, you've been given great examples. Of course, the way that 30% of the population of Bradford who are Muslim are going to answer all these magnetic points is they have their very clear ways of answering these points. Is there a way to connect? Well, of course there is. The Ummah, the idea of the worldwide Muslim community, that's what gives us connection. Is there a way to live? Of course there is. It's the Quran and the Hadith that tell us what to do. Is there a way out? Well, deliverance, we're trying to balance the scales so that we can be entered into paradise. Is there a way we control? Well, there can be quite a fatalistic understanding in Islam. Allah wills, that's it. So you see, all worldviews have their own way of answering these questions. But what I'm trying to say is, that your average white, indigenous, secular Bradford person is no more or less religious than the person who's going to the mosque on a Friday. Now, we have been told they're people of faith, the Christians, the Muslims, the Jews, Buddhists, others, they're in one box, and then there's people who don't have any faith. That's not how the Bible sees people. We're all religious. We're all asking these questions. The great thing, the more positive thing for engagement, as I was talking just over there, is that Muslims are very open about talking about their faith and talking about these things and what they believe in. With your average secular Brit, they're not. You've got to dig deep to get this stuff out. But in some ways, those who come from other traditional religious backgrounds or maybe immigrants coming in, everyone, you know, J.H. Bavinck is in Indonesia. He doesn't have to prove someone that they believe in connection or where. Everyone believes in gods. The question is, what's the God that can give me connection or norm or deliverance or whatever? And this is the final magnetic point, I suppose. It's the super one. As we press on connection and norm and deliverance and destiny, is there a way beyond? Is there a reality beyond reality? Now, of course, if you're a Muslim, of course you believe there is. But also, I think if you're a secular kind of Brit, you probably think that as well, but in an odd way. This is where I'm going to talk about secular religious experiences that people have. There's a phenomenon called champing. Does anyone know what champing is? It's a kind of portmanteau of two words, champing. Any quiz people? Again, great quiz question this. Champing is people who go to camp in churches that are derelict. So it's camping in church. Why would people want to do that? Why would people pay for that? Well, I was watching the ITV news a few years ago, and they interviewed a family and the lady. She wanted her kids to wake up in a church because in the morning the light through the stained glass window would give them an experience. It's this idea of kind of secular religious experiences. We know that Christianity is not true. We know that, you know, all that stuff, but there's something in us that still looks for something beyond. I think that's partly what was going on, why the nation wanted to pilgrimage down to see the Queen in state, which was that maybe last kind of religious rite of transcendence of something that we remember was important. And it's recognizing that, yeah, there are still Christian roots to that, but it's not like Bible-believing Christianity. But it's that idea that there is something beyond. Is there a way beyond? Okay, these are the magnetic points. Turn with me quickly to 1 Corinthians chapter 1, and we're going to try and bring all this together. So what you have just done, you've just done something in the last 20 minutes that's very biblical. What have you done? You've done what Paul did when he got to Athens. You have started to wander around the objects of worship. Well done. And you need to think about this more. In 1 Corinthians 1, this is a great example of how the gospel of Jesus Christ, and we're going to get to Jesus now, how does Jesus connect with all of these things we've been talking about? 1 Corinthians 1, verse 18. For the message of the cross is foolishness to those who are perishing, but to us who are being saved, it's the power of God. For it is written, I will destroy the wisdom of the wise, the intelligence of the intelligent I will frustrate. Where is the wise person? Where is the teacher of the law? Where is the philosopher of this age? Has not God made foolish the wisdom of the world? For since in the wisdom of God the world through its wisdom did not know him, God was pleased through the foolishness of what was preached to save those who believe. Jews demand signs and Greeks look for wisdom, but we preach Christ crucified, a stumbling block to Jews and foolishness to Gentiles. But to those whom God has called, both Jews and Greeks, Christ the power of God and the wisdom of God. For the foolishness of God is wiser than human wisdom, and the weakness of God is stronger than human strength. We've been looking at the culture around us using these magnetic points. People who are supporting football clubs, living for the weekend, going to working men's clubs, all of these things that we've been talking about. How does the gospel of Jesus Christ relate to them? Well, this passage is very helpful for us. It says two things, at least. The first is this. The message of Jesus Christ, Christ crucified, will always confront and be offensive to people's ways of doing things who don't know Jesus. What human beings think is wise, God thinks is foolish, and vice versa. Yeah? There's always confrontation. I've done one Radio 4 program. I was never invited back. Beyond Belief with Ernie Ray. Some of you may have come across it. And it was on the topic of judgment and hell. And I've done some writing on that in the past. And there was me, there was a Catholic journalist, and there was a lady who was a lecturer in theology at a university who believed in judgment and hell, but it had nothing to do with what the Bible said. So we started talking, and I said, yeah, I do believe in a final judgment. I do believe Jesus is coming back. I do believe that people need to know Jesus to be saved. And they said, Dan, this is medieval. How can you have this really offensive understanding of judgment? It's kind of, this is the modern world. How can you believe that? They were really offended when I talked about judgment. But here's the funny thing. They were equally offended when I spoke about grace. What, you mean someone on their deathbed could be forgiven of all the things they've done wrong? That's ridiculous. Do you see that's the foolishness of the cross? People are offended by judgment and grace at the same time. But that's what the message of the cross is. So whenever we encounter people who do not know Christ and call them to Jesus, there's always a part of our message that's going to be confrontational, because the message of the cross is foolishness. And that's important. There's always what one evangelist calls, Rico Tice calls, a line of pain that we have to go beyond. And we can't leave that out. Now, some of us are really good at being confrontational, and then we're surprised that no one wants to listen to what we're saying. Yeah? In this passage, there is the confrontation of the cross, but there's something else as well. Look, Paul talks about two different groups, two different ethnic groups, Jews and Greeks. Jews, they have their hopes and dreams and ways of viewing the world. It's all about the power. Greeks are not Jews. They're focusing on wisdom. Jews are not Greeks. Greeks are not Jews. Now you could say, well, why does Paul bother mentioning these two ethnic groups at all? Who cares what Jews or Greeks think? Who cares what people in Bradford think as opposed to people in Leeds or people in London or people in Kuala Lumpur? Doesn't matter. We're Christians, we preach Christ crucified. The context doesn't matter. But why does Paul make these two distinctions? He says, look, Jews demand signs and Greeks look for wisdom. They're both looking for these things in their lives that will make them flourish. This is what they think the answer to the world is. We preach Christ crucified, a stumbling block to Jews, foolishness to Gentiles, confrontation. But look, verse 24, but to those whom God has called, both Jews and Greeks, Christ the power of God and the wisdom of God. And we say, Paul, this sounds like a felt needs gospel. You mean Jews are looking for power and Jesus is power? Yes. Greeks are looking for wisdom and Jesus is wisdom? Yes. In precisely the opposite way that Jews and Greeks thought that power and wisdom would be delivered. A crucified Messiah is not powerful, it's weakness. A crucified Messiah is not wise, it's foolishness. And yet, Paul is still able to say, Jesus is the power of God. He is the wisdom of God, and he connects to their stories. Do you see? He connects as well as confronts. So the gospel has to connect and it has to confront at the same time. And in my experience, some Christians are great at the connection and they're not very good at the confrontation. Some are great at the confrontation, they're not very good at the connection. And Paul says that both are crucial. And you see how this is lived out in that Acts 17 passage? Paul does see the confrontation of what Jesus brings, and yet he still wanders around the objects of worship. So this brings it all back to the magnetic points. The gospel confronts and the gospel connects. The gospel subverts and the gospel fulfills. And we're not offering a philosophy or a worldview. We're offering a person. We're offering Jesus to people. So the question becomes, in our last little bit before lunch, how is it that Jesus both connects to and confronts those magnetic points? How is it that Jesus gives us connection in a way that challenges other ways that people connect? How does Jesus offer us a way to live that's different, that challenges but still connects with people? How does Jesus offer deliverance? And this is where I think we have to kind of, this is the hard bit of the day, because I don't, remember what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to bridge a gap, a chasm between, I really want to tell people about Jesus and my faith, and people are just living their lives, and I can't seem to get the conversation, I can't seem to be able to link the two without an awful gear crunch, you know. Did you watch the match on Saturday? Yeah, it was a great goal, wasn't it? Jesus scored a goal for all of us. You know, that kind of way of, you know, speaking. But what I'm trying to say to you is that we believe that Jesus is the way that we connect. We believe that Jesus has delivered us. We believe that Jesus has a purpose for our lives, destiny. And other people, they don't believe that, but they're still asking the same questions. So we've always got stickiness. We've always got a way that we can connect at a deep level. And what we have to do, and this is what I argue in my book, Make Faith Magnetic, and in my other book, Plugged In, is how do we enter into the world of the person? How do we get to know them? How do we learn where they're scratching those magnetic points? How do we explore? How do we talk to them about the things that they're kind of passionate about, or the things that they think this is the way I need to connect? How do we expose those things? In Jeremiah chapter 2, it's talking about God's covenant people, but I think it applies to those outside as well. Remember what Jeremiah 2 says? There are people who are trying to get water from pots, cisterns that cannot hold water. So it's someone like on their hands and knees trying to lick out the residue of a stagnant pot that's broken. When there's a fount of living water here, we are offering in Jesus a fount of living water, and people are trying to get water from a cracked cistern, a pot. And what we're trying to do in our witness to people, in our conversations, in the things that we do, is try to show people, hey, this is a cracked cistern. This isn't going to give you what you want. In fact, it's going to make things worse. Because do you know where that comes from? Let me offer you a fountain of living water. So Jesus both confronts and connects all of those magnetic points, but we can't keep it at kind of 30,000 feet. We have to connect it to the objects of worship that people are engaged with. So, for example, I mean, this is just people, and again, people say, oh, Dan, do people take football, do people take football that seriously? Do they organise their lives around their football club? Yes, they do, don't they? I mean, I live in Newcastle now. It's bad enough in London. It's crazy in Newcastle. And I've met some Leeds fans already in the last 24 hours. They're crazy as well, yeah? But here's the thing. How do we show people who are absolutely enthralled by their life revolves around their clubs? How do we start to kind of expose the problems of that kind of commitment? Well, England played football last night, and the stats are that when England lose a game, rates of domestic violence go up. Yeah? These aren't little things. These are big things. So what we're trying to do in our conversations with people is try to show people, look, the things that we put our trust in to find our identity, the rules that we live by, that we think are going to make us flourish, actually, when they're treated as ultimate things, then they don't work. Family is a wonderful thing, a gift from God, but it's not meant to be where all of our loyalties lie. We want to be delivered from all kinds of things, but does this give us the deliverance when we found what we're looking for sometimes? Does it give us what we want? I always remember talking to a guy, he was in Italy actually, and he was a recovering heroin addict. And he said to me, he said, look, I could never follow Jesus because I don't like people telling me what to do. And I said, what, you mean that heroin hasn't been telling you what to do for 20 years? He'd never made that connection. You see, as human beings, we're creatures, and we're always, we make things because we know that we're not the center of the universe and we need things. And this is what the magnetic points do. We're looking for connection. We're looking for norm. We're looking for deliverance. Now, how do we, in our conversation, our witness with people, try to get people to see that they have these commitments as well? And again, breaking it down, I've given some examples here. It might be that with the people that you're talking to, when you work out what makes them tick with the magnetic points, where are they looking for destiny, all these things, is to ask them, well, not in a facetious way, but how's that going for you? Is that working for you? Or being able to say to someone who has had some view in their life where it's let them down, or it's not working, or something's gone, we can say, that's what I love about Jesus. Just well, no, there's probably not time now, but it's the, well, probably it's true in Bradford, but in London, when I used to get a taxi or an Uber, invariably it might be a Muslim driver, and there was always a kind of an evil eye in the window warding off the evil spirits. Now, it's great to be able to say to that driver, look, I don't deny those evil spirits exist, but I believe in one who's Lord over all of those evil spirits, and I don't have an impersonal relationship with that person. I can call that person my loving Heavenly Father. I believe that God has given us agency. Islam has no concept of the image of God, but we can say as human beings, we're not God, we're only images, but we're images of God. Human beings have great dignity and respect. I can say that my life is not trying to balance the scale so that I'll be entering into paradise and I can have no assurance. I have assurance because I know that I have a Saviour who died for me. And it's the same with your secular friends as well. It's showing them to try and show the cracks in the pots where they're trying to get stagnant water. And that's where we can talk about our own faith in Jesus. And this is the going back to what I said at the beginning this morning. In some ways, all of our communities, we are the same as other people. We live in the same streets. We do things the same. But the only difference, and it is the difference, is that we have Jesus in our life, and that makes all the difference. But it's getting on the level of where people are at and admitting our common struggles, but saying, hey, this is how I think about it as a Christian, and I found this really helpful. This is where we need to understand Jesus. And it might be that the things that you're struggling with is because actually I believe that God did make you in his image, but you've gone against him, and you need to come back to him. Now, there's no new gospel message I'm giving you today. It's what we all think the gospel message is. And yet, how do we get traction with where people are at? That's what I'm really interested in. And we do that by listening to people, not just shoving what we think, knowing people well enough that they can talk to us. And that means engaging with people in the community, becoming friends with people who are different from us, not just doing everything with Christians all the time. And I'm as guilty of that as anyone. It's much easier not to do that. But for the sake of people, we want the most loving thing we can do for all people is to tell them about Jesus Christ. And drinking water from a cracked cistern is not good for people now and in the life to come. And it's a symptom of a bigger problem that people have, that they need to know that they've turned against the living God and they need to come back to him. And Jesus is there jumping up and down saying, here I am. So I'd love you to be thinking about that just as you go out from here, not just over lunch, but just think about, where these magnetic points might be helpful, where you're thinking, I can't seem to get traction with where this person is, they're not interested. Try and just think about them and where are they looking for connection? Where are they looking for deliverance? And then we can make those connections with Christ. I'm going to pray, then we're going to have lunch. When we come back, we're going to try and land the plane with some practical things about what that means for our lives, what that means for our communities and our churches. So let's pray. Lord,